Yeah. Y'all prefer the screen off or on? Dark. Yeah, that's too dark. Too dark. All right, guys. Let's get this kick started. We got some people on the Zoom. They still join on Zoom, so there we got about a handful out there. They're coming in a little bit at a time. And any questions from the Zoom audience, I'm going to capture them on that side, whether it's by chat or by mic, and then we'll bring them in. But guys, this is the first meeting we've had live in 18 months. Yeah, it's been a while. It's good to get out. It's good to see everybody healthy and strong and doing well. So we're all excited about this. This is actually my office, so we lost the Hess Club shortly after the COVID deal. So at the time we didn't need a place, but at the time being, I said, okay, let's open the doors here. Let's congregate and meet. Sufficient until the crowd gets bigger, then we're probably gonna have to find somewhere to get the crowd. So sandwiches are over there, chips, cookies, Coke, sodas, water. We've got other flavors in the fridge. There's coffee. The restrooms are down the hall towards the elevators. A little bit past that on your right. We're going to do some general announcements and some presentations of a couple of members and awards. And then we're going to open it up for employers or recruiters. So I'll check online, see who's there. I'm going to make a general commentary and announcements via Zoom and webinar, and then we're going to introduce Adam, and then we'll let you rock on with that. So again, thanks for joining. Hopefully we get more in the live sessions. Looking forward to seeing everybody. Zoom is still in process, so there's still people on the live chat. Val. That's your cue.
Yes, that's my cue.
I'll let Val announce real quick. Well, it's facing that way.
Okay, good. Well, Pete, as tradition with our AACE section, we always recognize the president from the previous year and always give a plaque as a recognition for the great job that he did. You had a challenging year because yours was the COVID year. And so we definitely had to scramble and change directions and everything on a dime. So you did a great job. We appreciate your leadership. And on behalf of the board and our Houston Gulf Coast section, thank you very much for a great job.
Since that best, because I think I missed your entire tenure. So for those that I hope to see you all in person this year. So thank you all very much.
Now, change back up front. Val.
So everybody knows that.
Yeah.
It is my privilege to step into the shoes. I'm not going to fit. I'm not going to fit. I'm not going to be able to fill your shoes as treasurer, but you have done an amazing job for this group. You know, it's everybody here knows it. Probably already had the plaque, so I gave you something. That's something from the group that you can use. Thank you from all of us.
So much. It has been, AACE, post section has been a really important part of my life and my career for a very long time. So it's kind of awkward, maybe is the right word, for Shane to be back there doing all the registration. I think wanting to kind of look over and say, are you doing it right now? You know? But it is, it's great, and I appreciate all the fun, and I'll still be part of the group. I'm still helping out when as needed, and doing whatever we need to do. So thank you guys very much.
This is too bad. Next month, I'm going to be on holidays for Jason's presenting, so there will be a spot open.
Ah, okay. I tell you.
Val's been a tremendous help. She's still helping behind the scenes. Don't think she's gone away.
No, it's not gone away.
She's helping bail me out on things, so appreciate it. So usually here we have, you know, some job openings and postings. And I don't see anybody in the recruiting space here, and even Charlie is occasionally online. And to make any job posting announcements, so I don't see him online. But so I guess if anybody has opportunities, there is some website redesign that I'm kind of heading up, trying to get that. I'm going to post more job openings on the website, so get more people opportunities in front of them. I know people are still looking, and you know, kind of get the foot traffic back to the AACE and trying to bring about a buzz. You know, get more members and volunteers. If anybody's willing to volunteer, we're always looking for people to help. So I don't have any of those announcements yet. And I wanted to point this out. This was prior to COVID, and in very late 2019, we were testing webinars at the time to see how we could increase, you know, an audience, not just for the Gulf Coast, but for those that wanted to be in the project control space. And this was a screenshot from back then, and it had a pretty good peak, and then it was like self-fulfilled prophecy, and then we ended up having to use virtual rooms and webinars to communicate. I just thought that was an interesting slide from back then, still today. And then, of course, the flash from the past, I guess, and then things were thriving. So our speaker, I probably wouldn't do him any justice of an introduction, so I'm going to allow you to do your self-introduction if you don't mind. But and even on your topic, but it's U.S. Coast Guard Arctic shipping lanes. Let me switch out the slide deck, and then we'll let you get rolling.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So my name is Adam Shaw, and I work for Shell. Prior to working for Shell, I worked for the Coast Guard. I was in the U.S. Coast Guard for 29 years, retired, and I worked about 12 years overall in Alaska in the Coast Guard career. And then I ended up headquarters, not the headquarters, the headquarters for Alaska in the Coast Guard. And the role there was really focused on part shipping, maritime traffic, maritime rules, regulations, port security, vessel safety. That was kind of my role. When I left, retired, there was a conveniently opening in Shell, who was at that time really engaged in the Arctic. So I was able to leave one maritime job in the Coast Guard and move into a maritime job in Shell. And I worked in Shell in the Arctic for about 4 years as the marine manager, responsible for all the vessels that came in and supported. Once we stopped with the drilling, I'm lucky to come to Houston. Then that's where I worked at the Technology Center for several years, and then I moved to Wood Creek campus, and that's where I met Dathan Beasley. run a project. And Shell is that's brilliant, just incredibly smart and talented, brilliant people. But with that brilliance comes disorganization, not lack of focus. So that's where we brought David in. And David really managed our program, kept us on track, kept us going, kept us focused, and led us to deliver. So when Dathan called me up to say, "Can you speak?" Very happy to return the favor for all that he did in our project. If I can come and talk a little bit here, I'd be happy to. So the question I had, Dathan, is, "What do you want me to talk about?" And he said, "Well, can you explain who you are, what you did?" He said, "Technical series." This is not a technical discussion. And he said, "That's good. That's exactly, let's give a different focus. Let people hear everything else." He wanted me to talk about some of the projects within Shell. I offered the Arctic because that one is near and dear to my heart, but two, it's not all of you may be familiar with it. So we figured that we could have something a little bit different, something, maybe some entertainment, but the message is your stakeholders. I think we all, as you as project management professionals, understand you have to manage stakeholders. But that was something in the Coast Guard we didn't get right the first time while we were working the Arctic. Since then, we've learned a lot more and things have progressed, but that was really, it was a hard lesson to learn. But more importantly, is learning the lesson is one thing, but then what do you do about it? And that's kind of the story I want to share today is understanding your stakeholders. What's the impact if you don't, and how do you actually get to them where you're actually being able to talk to them, interact with them, and have a conversation. So that's kind of what I want to apologize up front for the slides. If I had given this to Dathan and said, "Clean this up for me," in probably about 2 hours, he would. This is just my data dump in the slides. So hopefully you'll understand what I'm trying to say by the slides of my speech. But again, if I had Dathan by my side, I know it would be a little bit better. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So this is the top-down look of the globe. And that's the Arctic Ocean. And you can see the red and the blue, those are the different routes in the Arctic and then out of the Arctic. And you'll notice on the Greenland side, the Sweden side, and Canada, there are several ways in and out. But if you look more up the top and you get more centric to the United States, there's only really one way in and out of the Arctic. So that creates a choke point. And we'll get to that in a minute. That's right there at the Bering Strait. So in 2007, there was a significant increase of maritime traffic in and around the Arctic, both on the Greenland side and the United States side. This traffic concerned the Coast Guard because we're responsible for maritime safety, maritime security, vessel regulations, and so we needed to, so to speak, enter the Arctic to be able to understand it and then regulate it, and then make sure the vessels who are transiting it are safe and secure. Without really knowing a lot about the Arctic, we had to get into the Arctic. At the same time, we were hearing a lot of, I think you might remember all the global warming, the Arctic is melting, the ice pack, which generally stays centered, sometimes fluxes in and out. It does that seasonally anyway, but there's also a lot of concern that seasonally, when it was smaller, it was getting smaller even still, more than account for seasonality. So there was concern that the ice pack was melting, so there was an environmental concern. But what that also provided is an opportunity for more vessels to transit through. You could save a lot of time by going through the Arctic across the top rather than going around. Also, right around 2007, that's when Shell started being more advanced and more focal and planning to go into the Arctic. So now you have an area that's very environmentally sensitive, and now an oil major making notification that they're going in. So that just got a lot of attention and angst. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to shift the view a little bit now. And so now you can see that choke point, Bering Strait. There are two islands. There's a Big Diomede and Little Diomede. And then beneath that, you can see St. Lawrence Island.
You want to talk on this side so it'll pick up the mic better?
Oh, okay.
You can run the mouse. think they're complaining they can hear. You're right.
So all I have to do is,
You can click the box.
so I just wanted to give you kind of the look here. You've got the St. Lawrence Islands, you've got down there at the Aleutian chain, you've got the route that goes from China here over to Seattle over there, and that route goes just slightly under where it says North Pacific. So I mentioned earlier, if you could come from the East Siberian Sea, come through the Bering Strait, come through where it says Aleutian, you could go to China very quickly, and that saved a lot of time. And so there was a lot of opportunity for that. Also, if you could go from where it says Chukchi Sea and go to the right through the Beaufort Sea, you could go through the Northwest Passage, and now you're over in Greenland. So there were some opportunities for vessels for shipment. Again, this is a very environmentally sensitive area. It's got indigenous population that's very vocal, that uses all this water and the lands for subsistence. So it was just I would say it's a highly charged area. So what the Coast Guard opted to do was to manage that choke point by setting up some kind of routing system or vessel traffic system or areas to be avoided. Now, if you can imagine that the Coast Guard and at least maritime shipping in the United States, there's some very established shipping lanes. So you go into San Francisco, they have a vessel traffic management system where they have defined routes, and they have a watchtower, they have radar, and they have radio communications to control the vessels as it comes through Golden Gate Bridge. You have that in Houston Ship Channel, where you have a very clear vessel traffic system. It's not really a good place to put a vessel traffic system in that choke point, but we thought maybe we could have a vessel a traffic separation scheme where they go up north on one way, they come down south the other way, and they split the Diomede Islands so we could manage traffic that way. The way we manage these types of regulations is we'll put out a notice to comment in the Federal Register. This is what we intend to do. We leave it open for 30 days, ask for comments. We get their comments back, we address the comments, and then we can then propose a law, and then over a period of time, that then becomes how we manage. In this case, because there's it's so close to Russian, we would have to go through the IMO with our proposal, work it through the navigation committee, and then it would be passed through the IMO. So it became a much broader subject. So we need to make sure we had our ducks in a row when we developed this proposal. So we spent a lot of time what we thought was the right thing. So some of the things we really thought about is that we could have a, these are nautical charts, what you would see, actually these are the nautical charts for at that time. And we added the yellow there and we added the purple there as different ideas as get our brains flowing of how could we manage the vessel traffic through these areas. We could have a recommended route where mariners could choose to follow it or not. We could have precaution areas, which would be those yellow areas that say, just be careful around this. We could have areas to be avoided, which they're very similar to this yellow, but they have a little bit more legal teeth to them. And then you could actually have a traffic separation scheme where you have lines on a chart that vessels would follow. So those are the things we thought. And again, we could have gone with a VTS, a vessel traffic system, manned radars, manned communications. We ended up believing that the traffic separation scheme was the best route, that we would just put a corridor on the chart around the Diomedes Islands and have vessels that are going northbound stay on the right and vessels southbound staying on the left. In 2010, we submitted a notice to comment in the Federal Register. We had everything ready to go and we put it out there for 30 days and we waited for everyone to comment and tell us, yes, this is a good idea, and no, this is a bad idea, and if it's no, why? So then we could correct it. We got about half a dozen, maybe a dozen comments back. And one that worried us because this is a big issue, we thought. We were in Juneau, so although this is about 1,000 miles away from us, it's still in our backyard. We thought this would be a bigger issue than just get a dozen comments. But the other thing that concerned us, it was an overwhelming no. We don't like this idea. This is a bad idea. You haven't figured it out. And we'd love to give you better comments, but you haven't given us enough. Clearly, they did not like the traffic separation scheme. but clearly it was a very small minority. And so that got us worried. What else are we missing? A couple other things that came out is that the mariners who replied, the mariners who actually go through there, said that the soundings, you can see the numbers here, those are in fathoms, the soundings on the chart are wrong, and up to 12 feet. And if you can imagine you're a large cargo ship and there's a 12-foot difference of how much water you think there is and where the rocks really are under your keel, that could cause a significant problem. So they said, you don't have a good route. It doesn't make sense. You don't know how deep the water is. Now we have depths, but those are 1964. So clearly they're outdated, and they were done with technology. So there could have been formations that shifted, or it was just bad technology when we first did it, or when it was first done. The other thing is they said that you didn't account for seasonality of the ice. The ice doesn't know where your lanes are. And so if the ice comes this way and a mariner has to avoid the ice, they just encroached into a lane where now they're thinking it's a southbound. So you didn't think of seasonality of the ice. You didn't take in consideration these areas that are environmentally sensitive. You didn't take in consideration areas that around the Diomedes Island where the whales, not the whales, where the seals congregate, that's where the seals congregate, that's where the natives hunt. That's where they have their boats, or they walk across the ice. So you've just created a situation where you have a large population of people, subsistence users, in a shipping lane. You put them in harm. So there was a lot of things that we just didn't get right. So some of it I'll go over. Some of it I won't discuss too much. I want to focus on one specific stakeholder, and that's the native subsistence hunters. As we kind of regroup from this, we realize there is a significant, that choke point is more than just a maritime choke point. That is everything choke point. Ecotourism, at that time, they had people who were going out in small yachts, and you could get an Arctic tour. And so you'd go up there, they'd come out of Nome and they go through there and circle around the Arctic Circle and come back out. There's no way to help manage and save those people if they have a distress. So some of these people are older, they've saved all their savings, they want to go in the Arctic. They have a heart attack out there. There's no way to get them out there. It's just too far away. So we had to start thinking about that. We have the oil and gas, Shell was coming up there. The Walrus and the Whaling Commissions, a very strong organized group for these subsistence hunters. The state and local government, the state of Alaska said, federal government, stay away from us. We don't want it. We don't want you here. The local governments weren't as strong as the state, but the local government still has some strong opinions against having anyone regulate what they do up there. We won't even get to the Russians because that came later. But the National Pacific, North Pacific Fisheries Commission, there's a lot of fishermen that come up here, whether they're going for crab or halibut or pollock. A huge amount of the United States fisheries comes from this area. They did not want us regulating, the federal government regulating how they can go and operate there. You had environmental concerns. Each of the different villages or tribes, so to speak, you had the Canadians on the other side. You had village corporations, and I'll get to that in a little bit, where the village corporation comes in. But we realized that this was much bigger than just doing a shipping lane. If we were going to do it right, and we knew we did it wrong already, we needed to do it better. We needed to engage in our stakeholders. So we developed plans for each of the different stakeholders. Some were easy. The North Pacific Fisheries Committee, they have regular meetings in Seattle. It was very easy to get a hold of them. Some of them were, Shell, oil and gas, Shell was already operating. We could call them up and say, come talk to us. Shell at that point was very responsive to the federal government and said, this is what we want to do. This is why I want to do it. How can we work together? So some of it was easy. What was hard was the native population. How do you reach them? They don't trust federal government. And if you're an Indian out of Montana, you don't trust the federal government. If you're a native in Alaska, you do not trust the government. So when the government says, "Hey, we need to hear from you because we're here to help," they didn't want to listen. The other thing is they didn't have access.
So we thought, well, we'll put out a notice in the Federal Register. Well, that's easy to us. To us, that makes sense. To them, what's the Federal Register, and what do you want me to do about this? So I'll get in a little bit more about this this access in a moment. But to kind of put it in perspective, that lower panhandle, that's where Juneau is, and that's where we worked out of. That's where the state capital is. You can see St. Lawrence Island. You can see King Island. A little bit further up there is the Strait, way up at the top. But for where we were in Juneau to where at the tip of Barrow is, that's 1,100 miles. And if you look, that that's where we're talking about. That's Georgia, and I'm not sure what state that is. Forgive me for lack of map sense. Almost Canada. So from Georgia to almost Canada, that's the kind of distance we're talking about. So and it's not easy. There's no roads. The roads are all on the coast, and you cannot drive unless you're an ice road trucker from Anchorage up to Barrow. It's all by flight or take a boat around. And you can only do the boat when it's good weather and when it's not frozen with ice. So managing that kind of distance became very, very challenging. Distance wasn't the only barrier to us working with the natives. I mentioned distrust, which was huge. The geographic separation I mentioned. This infrastructure, I said there's no roads, there's no internet either. There's no gas, no water, no power, none of that. These are all just little tiny hubs of communities. And without reliable cell phone, there's no way to communicate unless you use a radio. And that's very challenging when you're in a federal office and you're told to talk to a native in the North Slope. If you can't call them because they don't have a phone, you can't drive there, you can't fly there. It really limits your options. And so conversely, they can't call us. So when we put out a Federal Register, say, tell us your opinion, we got nothing back because one, they didn't know we were asking, and two, they didn't know how to get a hold of us. These small villages are all very tight community, very reliant on subsistence. What we found later is if you have a town meeting, a lot of them will show up. If you bring food, if you bring swag, gifts, they'll show up unless something else is more important. If it's nice weather and the berries are ripe, they're all going to go pick the berries. They're not going to come to your meeting. Which we've sat in an empty room waiting for some because it's fish camp is on. The fish are running. They're going to go. That's their food. So you have to be willing to schedule around their life if you want to make an impact and actually talk with them. And in many places, these villages are so small. Well, there is no hotel, there is no general store, but they do have a community building. So when you fly up there, you have to be prepared to stay 2 or 3 days in a one-room community building because that's where you're going to live and do your presentation and go to sleep at night while they all go home, because there is where else to stay, because the planes only come out 2 or 3 times a week. So it's just you have to get your mind around it. And so again, sitting in Juneau, where we've got all the comforts of home, we are the federal government, we know how things work. It's different when you go out on their turf. And that's really one of the messages is you have to go meet them at their turf on their terms. If you try to say, we're here, we know what's best, and this is how it's going to be, we found you're going to fail miserably. So this is just, I'll let you look at it. I'm not going to talk to this slide yet, but it's very busy and I just want you to get an opportunity to look at it. So we knew we missed the native population. We kind of understood why we missed it. What I want to talk about is so what? Why is it important? Again, at that time, there was a lot of concern about the environmental and who did the environment affect? It was the natives. So it was important for us to get their input. The people on the boundaries, as they go through here, don't see the weather, don't see the ice, don't see the lanes, they don't see the borders. So there are a lot of people in the Diomedes Islands who have relatives in Russia and relatives in Wales, and they just go back and forth. In the winter, they walk because it's ice. In the summer, they go on their boats. So they don't care about the borders. What that does, it creates challenges for us because this is a global issue now. This has become more than just an Alaska issue, more than just a US issue. This has now become a more of a broader global issue, especially if we're going to take it to the IMO. So we need to make sure we got the stakeholders, got their opinion, and did it right, because we didn't want to escalate this up to the IMO and find out the Russians say, you didn't talk to us, we don't want to do this, or you missed something. So that's, again, there's a lot of, we needed to do this right. Alaska has a significant and very powerful indigenous population. I think some of you might remember when in the early 70s, right, 1971, there was a lot of legislation passed about Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. This was a precursor because of the oil, all the oil that was coming out of Barrow and coming down into Valdez. It was going through a bunch of lands. Well, whose lands were they? It was up in air, a multi-decade fight of whose land this pipeline went through. Before the pipeline could be built, they had to clear that up. Alaska Natives had a strong voice in how that was divvied up. The Alaska Natives Claims Settlement Act set aside lands, set aside money, and provided 12 different corporations in Alaska to manage different regions. These regions now had a whole lot of money, had their own land, and then now became a powerful voice in Alaska. It was necessary to get the pipeline through, but that created, one, it was a benefit for them, but two, now they have a voice. So we need to get their voice if we're going to try to make any change in how we manage shipping. I guess the other thing is, there was, at that time in 2010, there was just a strong growing influence of the Arctic, the importance to the environment and how it impacts the natives, specifically around subsistence. Last thing that was important that we needed to recognize is they had a lot of local knowledge. So I mentioned walking on the ice over the Diomedes. They had thousands of years of living and being in this environment. They understood the environment. They understand the migratory patterns of the whales, the birds, the seals. They knew when the ice was, I forgot, there's about 2 dozen different names for ice, because they know ice and they know if it's thick or thin. If it's, we have a lot of names for ice, not as many as they do, because they know the ice. We needed to better understand what they know. So if we're managing ships in the ice, we have to have that, and they just had that local knowledge. The other thing is they knew where the subsistence and the hunting grounds, where they were and where they were going to be. And again, that's if we're talking the seasonality, if we have a ship coming through, but that's right at the same time that there's going to be, we know the whales go through there, having their input to help shape that traffic pattern, or when the seasonality, that became important. So I talked about the importance, what we did wrong, how we need to fix it. So our approach to getting their input spans several different layers. And at the time, the Coast Guard was again, we needed to enter into the Arctic. So we had a thing called Arctic Shield. That was a multi-year program where we did community outreach. We did notifications. We did whatever we could to make the federal government not look as bad as they thought we were, but also we can't, you just can't hand out money. You can't just, you have to have it linked to a federal program or something that clearly supports them. So boating safety was a big one. They operate in boats everywhere. They don't have radios. They don't have life jackets. The boats are not inspected. The captains aren't licensed. When you go to a village that doesn't see a white man for a year at a time, and when you come in there and say, where's your life jacket? Where's your fire extinguisher? Where's your radio? Where's your permit to have the radio? Where's your, all that, they don't care about that. Because they know once you leave, you're not coming back for another year, and it won't be you, it'll be someone else. So a lot of these issues just weren't important to them. So boating safety, now clearly boating safety is, they were having deaths of young people because they didn't have the knowledge of the elders, or they were young kids who were getting into trouble and drowning. So we brought life jackets. We talked about boating safety. We talked about some of the programs that were important to help their safety, their boating safety. There were a lot of, as H as it sounds, dog sled. That was a huge mode of transportation. They have all kinds of dogs, but there are no vets. So when we came up there, we partnered with the Air National Guard and the Army, and they had vets who were Army members. We just put them on the airplane with us. They went up there, instead of doing their vet work in Anchorage, they did it there. So they had free access to a vet, something that they never had. Doing things like that started to endear them to us. We have a team in Chicago, in the Great Lakes, that focuses on ice rescue. We brought that team to them, and we didn't tell them we know ice rescue. We told them, can we learn ice rescue from you? So there was a lot of coordination and back and forth. They have their own search and rescue team up there because, again, all our Coast Guard bases are down here at Kodiak and down in the Panhandle. There's no way an aircraft or a helicopter can go up there. They have a very sophisticated search and rescue team. They didn't have a sophisticated ice rescue team. We have an ice rescue team. We brought them out. They shared, they partnered, they gave each other equipment, and they talked about lessons learned. And that developed a much stronger response, emergency response up in the Arctic. So now they're, okay, the Coast Guard, maybe you guys aren't so bad. Federal government, we don't like you, but the Coast Guard, we like you and we trust you. The other thing is I mentioned this is a 4-year program. We came back and back and back. And then we hit every one of these spots with something. And many times where we like the double stars, we told them we're coming ahead of time. And a week later we showed up. That one, they knew we're coming. They could plan their schedule. And then when we showed up, then they say, okay, they're serious because they came back. So we really tried in some of the major points to target our engagement to make sure that we got the best value from it. And that consistent engagement is really critical, because we told them this is what we're going to do, this is what we think, and then we left and we come back and we said, what do you think? And they would tell us what they thought. We'd come back, we come back again. We said, well, we heard what you said. How about this? And it became a dialogue, because again, they're not calling us, they're not reaching out to us. So when we come back and say, we heard what you said last time, but now we think about this, what do you think? They now see a conversation. Now they're feeling that they're being treated equal. Now they're willing to reach out and again, develop a partnership of trust. The other thing is, when you're there for 2 or 3 days because it's weathered in or your plane's not coming, you've got nothing to do but be with them. And they, everywhere I went, people were accommodating, they were friendly, they were nice. Hey, come to my house for dinner tonight. Now, a lot of stuff that they ate, I didn't like, but that's subsistence. But I ate it. I sat at their table and I ate it. And breaking bread with someone is huge. Look, you have food here. It's that commonality. It really breaks down a lot of barriers. And again, that goes back to where I said, meeting them on their own terms. And I guess probably the biggest thing here is humility is critical. And they were not used to a federal government showing humility. Again, it was clear, federal government they did not like, but now Coast Guard they do like. And now we're willing to talk to you. Now we're willing to share what we think about this, because we think something's actually going to come out of it. This is Barrow. That's what we're talking about. You talk to an admiral in Washington, D.C., and you tell him, I'm having trouble talking to these people. He doesn't want to hear that because he's not seeing that. I had the same problem with my admiral in Juneau. Until you get someone there and see that's the stakeholder. That's who, we talked about how important it was. We talked how we didn't get their opinion. And if this is how they live and how they are, think about what you're asking. And is it important to them? Are they going to take any of their time to try to call you from 1,000 miles away in a phone that's not going to work? No, that's what you have to remember about your stakeholder. I just thought this was good because this is just life. In the winter, it's all white. In the summer, you can see the gravel roads. This is the airport in, I think it's Sabunga. That's the plane I landed in. That's the ice runway. And there is the ground crew taking me in from the airport. You have to put your mind, again, you have to go meet them where they are, because that's where they are. And again, if you're thinking that, I mean, look, we've got Zoom. This is great technology. They don't have it. That's the village. That's the welcoming committee. They knew my team and I were coming. So, and when you see the same people day after day after day, if a new person shows up, that's exciting. That's new. You're going to want to see what's going on. So, and if you come back regularly, then they know, and they know when you're coming, it becomes really a social fun event, and it became very enjoyable. And I think that's what helped build the trust. The building on the right is one of the community centers, and that's right. In many times I stayed in that. I can remember one time there was the tsunami warming center, and they called banging on my door at 2 a.m. There's been a big earthquake. We expect a tidal wave. You got to run. You got to come with us. We got to get to land that's over 100 feet. There's no land over 100 feet. But they were told that's what you have to do when the tsunami warning comes. So they came and got me, and we all went inland until they had the school gym, and we stayed the night in the school gym. But that's where you're going to stay. That's where you need to be prepared to stay, to meet them on their terms. A lot of the rooms were just like this. It was a community center with a single room just this size. Everything happened in here, all the business, all the fun, all the play, the schools, everything. So they had a kitchen, and then they had a lot of times a little room. I could sleep in a little room. I can make stuff out of the kitchen. But if I wasn't up early enough, the kids were in there coming to school. So I had to find some place else. If this is a typical meeting with a community. And you can see there's a Coast Guard there. There's a presenter there. This guy, this is in, I think this is Barrow. So that's their search and rescue team. That's how you engage and got public input. This is the store. I learned very early on that if I didn't bring what I needed, I wasn't going to get it. One, because I felt very bad that here I had access to stuff. And if I show up for a 2-day or turned into 3 days and I start using their stuff, what are they going to do? So that became something very sensitive point for all of our teams. Don't go up there unless you're personally ready to stay there for a week. If you have medication, if you have dietary things, if you want a specific snack, bring it. Don't take away from what they have. The more and more we got involved and engaged, and the more I went back and explained what we're doing and talked to them, the more access I got, to the point where I had a lot of good access with the elders. And that's really where you need to be. You need to be able to speak with the elders. No, that was a Fairweather. That was a NOAA ship. They started learning from us. So there's a couple Captain Adam Shaw hats up in North Slope because, but it only went to the elders. You wouldn't give a hat like that to the secretary. I mean, they're, I'm not sure if I talk about this next or in a minute, but maybe it's a good time. You have to respect their cultural differences. And this is one of that, being able to talk with the elder. There's a Western way of talking and there's a native way of talking. It's slow and drawn out. Think about if you're in I'll be very crude here. You're in an igloo for 9 months of the year. You're social. You're talking. You're always telling stories. You live in you work in a federal building in Houston. You don't tell stories. You get to work and you get out of there. When those two cultures collide, something's going to give. So you had to be prepared to listen and talk and share, tell stories, and just let the conversation get to you. You don't come in the first day, this is what I want to do, this is why I want to do it. If you do that, they're going to wait for you to leave and they know you're not coming back. So you have to think of the two different cultures. They are social, we're task. We have to manage how we, and again, if someone comes in and say the whales are coming through or there's the seals are out in the ice, they're going to leave the building. And it's really not a disrespect for you, but it's their livelihood. They have to. Respecting elders is key, and also rank. Rank really matters for several reasons. And that's why he's wearing the captain's hat of the motor vessel Fairweather, which is a NOAA ship, because it's the captain's hat. He's not going to wear the hat of the engineer. He's not going to wear the hat of the seaman. He wants the captain because he's an elder. His organization, his tribe, his community respect the elder and the hierarchy. The military respects the hierarchy. A lot of Alaskan natives are veterans. There's a very high per capita. There's an extremely high number of Alaska natives who are veterans. So they understand because they respect the military. And then they go into their organ. You don't know who's a vet or who's not. You don't know who's who. That's the other thing is when you're talking to people, you don't know who you're talking to. The other thing is there's a lot of, especially in Barrow and in that North Slope, heavy influence from the old whaling captains who came from the New England when they went up there and did the whale hunting. They have a very strong maritime history. They have strong ties to the whaling captains. They know a captain. A ship captain is extremely valuable and important person to them. So again, rank has its matter. And even with the tribes, they have their own hierarchy. So when you're on dealing with them, you have to remember that. So this was not the day one of my engagements with these people. This is many visits and word spreads. I don't know. They don't have phones, but I don't know how they do it. But villages all around know each other. If you say something in one village and you say something in a different village, it's going to get back to you. They have a communication. They know. So after a couple of years of working through here, I became known. And it became easier for me to engage and get the access to the native elders. And when he said, this is what we're going to do and why we're going to do it, everybody listened. Now, I guess that's the other thing. In a conversation, the elder will not talk till the very end. And then he'll listen to everything that everybody has to, and everybody gets something to say. Everyone has their time to say it. There's no 2-hour meetings. But when they're done, the elder will say, I've heard, and this is what we're going to do. And the meeting's over. There is no, well, I think, no, the elder spoke, that's it. So having the access to the elder to be able to understand and have a good relationship is important. And probably just important is if you're to the point where you're engaged with the children, you have engaged with the community. And when you engage with the community, you have a respect and a partnership with the elders, you are now in a position that you've captured your stakeholder, especially in this stakeholder. And that's really the goal, what we're looking for. I wanted to share this picture because this is kind of, I think, this wasn't staged. I was on that ship and they took me to Big Diomede, and I spent several days on Diomede, right in the middle between the straits. While they were waiting for me, someone snapped this picture. That's their life. The polar bear is significant in their life. The polar bear follows the seals. The polar bear follows the beached whale. When they have a whale hunt and they bring the whale on the shore and they're cutting it all up and giving it to all the people, they have people watching out for the polar bears because it's just part of their life. And there's a Coast Guard ship there. Same thing with when you think about of any ship, you are in their land. Their land is different than what you're expecting, what you're used to. So I just like that picture. I think I better wrap things up here. After all this, after 4 years of engagement, 4 years of discussion, all the Arctic Shield, all the other things we did, and engagements with the other stakeholders at a different level, we finally came up with a plan. This is what we think. This is a plan that the natives agreed to. It's a plan that the shipping companies, the fishing companies, all those stakeholders, they all agreed to it. We then were able to take that plan and we shared through diplomatic channels with the Russians. The Russians started something on their own. I don't think they did it the way we did it. They have a different outlook, but they agreed to our plan. So the U.S. Coast Guard then handed this plan over in the navigation subcommittee. Both the Russian envoy and the U.S. envoy recommended to the IMO, and the IMO accepted it in 2018. And in December 2018, we all agreed at an international level that we would have areas to be avoided. And you can see where before I was just focused on the choke point. Now we have routing lanes around that choke point all the way down down here, almost to Savunga, to manage the areas that we now realize are very important and areas need to be avoided. So the island here, St. Lawrence Island, even King Island. Again, that's not what we focus on. We were talking a traffic separation scheme up here. We realized that this, and now the rest of the US and the Russians, this is how we're going to operate as we go through there. And I think we still have a couple minutes. I'm happy to open it up to questions or thoughts or comments.
It's a good question. It's a good comment. I was just listening to you. I relate to that, but you really took it to a very high level with your team over there. Back in 2012, due to my background, my ethnicity, they sent me to Saudi Arabia, the company I used to work for. So it's the complete opposite environment, not freezing, but it's scorching heat. I thought I spoke the language. They immediately picked up on my Jersey accent, and most of the community in Jersey speak mixed Arabic. It's not specific for Egyptians or Saudis, so they picked immediately on my accent. But I managed to do a few of the things that you did. You took it to really an impressive heights. But after I left, I heard the company got kicked out, Saudi Arabia. It was a US firm. And the reason for it was they have not done 1% of what you said they did there. They went into the place. I represent the federal Saudi government. Even the Saudi government themselves, when they go to these areas, they do exactly what you did. The government of Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Right, coming with the king's name, they still do what the elderly. They have the same. It's amazing what you were telling me. You telling me about Saudi Arabia. But they got their asses kicked, and the company that came afterwards did exactly some of the stuff. They didn't tell me exactly what they did, but they started by building first the comfortable thing with the community before they even touched. Yeah. Any highways there.
Shell had to do the exact same thing going into the Arctic. Yeah. So,
and I guess what you're saying is let them own the job. That's what you did. This is your job. I'm just a visitor helping you. Kind of. Is that the message?
Meet them on their own terms.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm impressed. That's a good job there.
There. I was going to say, I understand that this is probably your biggest stakeholder issue.
No.
Or was it?
This is the one I was almost having.
I'm just sure about a couple of the other stakeholder issues.
North Pacific shipping, that was huge, and that's money. So it's, sitting in front of the admiral and said, I need to spend resources and efforts to the natives, but my counterpart saying, I need to spend effort and resources to North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, which is an established, recognized organization that has a lot of money. There were some decisions that had to be made. Where were we going to put our resources? Are we going to follow the money, or are we going to follow something that's, in some cases, felt like a nice thing to do? So that was, there were several pockets. The tourism industry is huge. And the amount of money that goes through there from a tourism, the search and rescue aspect. And so, my counterpart does search and rescue, and he's saying, why are you taking a helicopter with a vet when I need that helicopter to do some rescues? So there was a lot of challenges, and this was not our only stakeholder, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily the biggest stakeholder.
And outside of the military aspect, did you have a decision matrix in place for situations like that where, are we going to be nice? Are we going to go for the money? Like, was that pre-established, or was it something that you got into it and you were like, man, we really need to have?
We developed a concept of operations that outlined all the different risks, all the different stakeholders, why we needed to do different things. We had several different courses of actions that was reviewed. When the pyramid, there was the admiral, there was chief of staff, and it was me and two other captains. We had a lot to say, so we could get behind closed doors and talk about it. Then the admiral would then go out to the Arctic Commission. There's the federal government. There's the state government. There was a lot, and so the admiral kind of pushed this concept to other stakeholders in the U.S. government and state, and they would kind of tweak. Well, what about this? What about this? So there was a lot of consensus building before we went from concept operations to an operational plan.
Anybody online have a question? They can unmute themselves. We got time for a couple more.
And, did you see that TV series Expedition to the Edge?
No,
It was really, my wife and I watched it last year. It was really cool and great follow-up to this where a guy and just a bunch of almost amateur sailors were taking a boat through the Northwest Passage. It was really cool.
yeah, when I was in the Coast Guard, we didn't like those people.
No.
Bob? Is there any other questions?
The reason why I asked you about the hat is when I went to one of these sites in the middle of nowhere, for Saudi Arabia, I was wearing my Yankee hat. Right, so one of the kids, this is what, I was smiling the whole presentation, one of the kids just looked at me and say something like, what is that? And I said, it's a Yankee hat. They asked me, what is Yankee? So I explained the whole thing about baseball and so on quickly because the guy was following me anyway. His eyes, I can see, his eyes was fixated
Yep.
on that thing. And they were different things, you know, they were this, I forgot his name, but they were something, they were this thing. So I just gave it to him. Interesting enough, that little hat, I mean, it cost me $35 in New York, but it was well worth investment. That hat saved me about a day looking for some specific marking points for the project. Because everybody afterwards, his father knew the area like the back of his hand. I mean, to me, it's freaking desert. I
Yeah.
can see nothing. But to him, he sees things, his eyes, it's like, you know, so this is why I asked you about the hat. If you give him your hat, because that's what I did. It worked.
All right. I think we're.
All right, sorry if I went over.
That's okay.
No, that's great.
Want to present to you, being a speaker. Thank you for
My pleasure.
thank you for coming out. It was a great
Oh, thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
And I guess next month you're presenting, right? Yes, I am. All right. So we'll be sending out notifications.
All right.
Feel free to grab sandwiches to go, chips to go.
We're not gonna keep those same sandwiches for next.
There might be a little green.
The chips and the cookies might, and the pickles might, certainly the sandwiches, so feel free to take some home.
For those of you online, thank you for joining.
You need any help?